What's going on, guys? So can you figure out where I am again? So I am in Detroit, Michigan again, and I am out here for a Ram event. And every time I come out here for a Ram event, they sure know which truck to put me in. I feel like this is the same truck that they always put me in because they know that I absolutely love these Ram heavy-duty dually pickup trucks. And I don't know how many of these they have as far as like media vehicles, but every time I fly into Detroit for a Ram event, I have this bad boy waiting for me. This is absolutely beautiful. If you've watched the channel for a while, you've probably seen it. Full reviews on this beast on my channel. This is a 2025 Ram 3500 heavy-duty vehicle, heavy-duty pickup truck with the newest generation of the 6.7 liter Cummins turbo diesel engine. This thing is an absolute beast. And I have so many fond memories of this truck that I always like to reference back to the payload capacity on this thing. So check this out. 5,409 pounds worth of cargo capacity in this truck. This is a Laramie, and this is absolutely beautiful. This is what I consider to be kind of like the everyman's truck. And what I mean by that is there's so much rawness to this vehicle. It doesn't ride like a Cadillac. It's not going to give you the same type of driving dynamics that you might expect in like a half-ton Laramie or something that's designed more for comfort. This is designed to give you a tremendous amount of luxury, absolutely beautiful interior, great technology, but at the same time, over 5,400 pounds worth of cargo capacity, which means if you're gonna be using that big old goose ball in the back with that puck mount system, whether it's a fifth wheel or whether it's a gooseneck trailer, or you're gonna be hitching something up to the back of this truck through a conventional hitch in the 2.5-inch receiver back here, this is the right truck for the job. It's not going to be the smoothest riding vehicle when you're not towing anything, and it's not going to be the smoothest riding vehicle when you don't have a tremendous amount of weight in the back. But this is an absolute beast. Four-wheel drive Laramie Sport. Anyways, drop a comment below. If you haven't seen the videos that I've made on this truck, and I made a lot of them, go back and check them out, because this right here is one absolutely sweet truck. Okay, so we are now on the road in this 2025 Ram 3500 heavy-duty truck with, again, over 5,400 pounds worth of cargo capacity. What that means to a lot of people is a truck that's going to be relatively wide because it's a dually, and it's going to have a pretty firm ride because the springs aren't going to move very much when you're not towing anything heavy. Now, I thought I was just going to, drive this truck to the event and not really make any content on it. But then I started thinking, there's a lot of people out there who wonder, what are the pros and cons of having a truck like this? And when I say like this, I'm talking about from any of the manufacturers, whether it's a Ram dually, whether it's one of the GM duallies, or whether it's a Ford. If you are looking at getting a dually, what are the pros and what are the cons? And let's put this in context by specifically talking about folks who are going to use it to haul some type of a trailer. So let's first talk about ride quality. This is definitely going to be a con. This is going to be an area where about 90% of people would agree with me if they've driven a dually, and probably 10% won't agree with me. But they probably will choose to disagree with me only because they're kind of trying to play, hate to say this, the macho side of driving a dually. And that's the fact that with a rough ride comes a relatively uncomfortable ride when you don't have it loaded with weight. If you don't have a lot of tongue weight, a lot of weight in the bed, you are going to feel the suspension. It's going to transfer through the truck far easier than it would a truck with softer suspension. And that's again because the springs on this truck are designed to be very firm, so they can take a tremendous amount of downward pressure, downward vertical payload. Now, I say that because a lot of people will buy a dually because they absolutely need it. They'll get a fifth wheel, they'll get a super, super heavy conventional trailer or gooseneck. They get a dually because that's the right truck from a payload capacity perspective. But then they kind of regret it. And in many ways, they won't admit that they regret it, but they kind of regret it when they're not towing anything, because the ride can be really, really harsh. It can be firm. It can definitely be uncomfortable to a lot of people. So I think a lot of people stick with it and they stay with it because they justify to themselves, this is how trucks drove back in the 80s and 70s, and they weren't super soft or cushy. But the reality of it is a modern day dually truck is going to probably ride worse than even a half-ton truck back in the 70s or 80s. It's just kind of a fact because, again, the amount of leaf springs and the amount of payload these things are designed to carry. Now, that is definitely on the negative side. But let's kind of move back and forth. What's a positive of having really firm suspension? Well, to most people, it's going to be exactly what you think, and that's the fact that that typically comes along with the truck that's going to have a tremendous amount of payload capacity, which means you're going to have a vehicle that's designed to carry significantly more weight in the back, whether it's cargo or whether it's tongue weight or pin weight from an RV or gooseneck trailer or whatever type of trailer you haul. You are going to have more capability with less sag because of that firmer, heavier duty suspension. A lot of people will say, well, why can't we just add airbags to it? Well, airbags, again, they don't soften your suspension. They level out your vehicle. And all you're essentially doing at that point by adding airbags is creating an active way of leveling the back of the truck up, but it can actually make your ride firmer. It can make your ride feel a little less plush than it did before you added the airbags. A full airbag replacement system is what will typically give you the smoother ride. If you replace all of the leaf springs, everything back there with airbags, that's traditionally what's going to give you the smoothest possible ride, but it's very expensive, and you're very likely going to eliminate certain warranted aspects of your truck by doing things like that, and you add a lot more complexity to the suspension. So these are just things that you want to be aware of whenever we talk about owning a dually and doing major suspension modifications to try to improve the ride. But yes, with this firm suspension comes the reason why a lot of people get dualies, and that is the crazy amount of cargo capacity and payload capacity that you gain with these trucks. You also get redundancy in the form of 2 extra tires in the back. If you're hauling a big heavy trailer, a fifth wheel, or shoot, not hauling anything at all, having an extra set of tires on the back making contact with the ground can definitely give you some peace of mind in the event of a blowout, especially if you're hauling a heavy trailer. If we have a big fifth wheel back there that's giving, 3,600 pounds worth of downward pressure on the back, or I'm hauling a bunch of concrete or a bunch of ready mix, whatever I'm hauling in the back, and I have a tire blowout on a single rear wheel truck, well, that's a pretty serious event to happen. In some cases, it might not amount to much more than scaring the crap out of you and you might have to pull over, but in many cases, it could cause a really, really dangerous situation in terms of how things move and shift. And that's not a good thing either. Now, if you're like me, and I'm not saying everyone's like me, but I absolutely love the look of a beastly, huge dually pickup truck. I love the capability and the knowledge that I have that capability, and that's one of the reasons why I really love my F450, even when I'm not towing something heavy with it, even when I'm not carrying a tremendous amount of weight. I love the fact that I'm actually in something that I can define as substantial, something with a tremendous amount of capability just in the event I need it. And to be honest with you, I just love the look of dually trucks. I love the stance. Now, a downside is that stance, the fact that the truck is about 8 feet wide. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult getting in and out of some areas. And yes, with certain trucks like the 450 with the much more aggressive turning angle, you do have maneuverability that some of the other ones aren't going to have. But any way you slice it, having 8 feet of width at the back can make it a bit difficult if you're trying to get through that fast food restaurant that you're trying to stop at quickly. Now, a big pro is the fact that with a lot of newer vehicles, and I know people probably have experienced this if you have a car, have you noticed how everyone's headlights seem to blind you these days? Well, one of the reasons for that is because everybody's driving SUVs now, SUVs and trucks. And when you drive SUVs and trucks, the headlights tend to be higher off the ground, and they tend to cast in the direction of people who have lower cars. When we drive the Subaru around, that's an exact issue we deal with all the time. The headlights of almost anything blind us, and it's kind of annoying. But when you're in a truck like this, let's just say you're more of the offender than the offendee, and you tend to have a height advantage, which does make it a little bit more, let's just say a little bit more tolerable when you're on the road with a lot of these vehicles with these super bright LED headlights. And having that stance can definitely help you as well. All right, so at the back again, and this is going to be for most dually pickup trucks. Ram is really the exception because they offer the mega cab version of a dually, which is going to make your bed about 6.5 feet long versus 8. But what's nice about almost all dualies is the fact that you get a super huge bed, and that bed comes in really handy when it's time to go to Lowe's, Home Depot, and pick up a bunch of stuff, knowing the fact that you're not going to have to really worry about anything overloading the truck for the most part, right? You can always pick up too much stuff, but I think for most people, knowing that you have the capability of picking up a pallet of sod or a pallet of ready mix or a pallet of water is pretty dang nice. Knowing that you don't have to worry about your truck squatting down and you being a YouTube sensation and everyone telling you that you're about to snap your axle. Not as much of a concern when you have a truck like this. Now, something I do have to talk about, if you own a truck like this, you have selection of just about any type of RV that you might ever want to get, or trailer for that matter, unless you're talking about big commercial trailers. You have the flexibility of going to an RV dealership and pretty much saying, that's the one I want, without having to look too closely at the numbers on it, because this is going to have the cargo capacity to really carry just about any tongue weight or pin weight of most fifth wheels, most travel trailers, and most towable trailers in general that are on the road from a light duty perspective. We're not talking about trailers that are designed for Peterbilts or trailers that are designed for Class 8 semi-trucks. So if you start off with a truck like this, you do have that flexibility, which is really nice, and it gives you basically an open selection of the types of RVs, floor plans, and weights that you might want to look at, which is really, really important if you are considering moving from maybe a small to medium to large, or just going straight for that large fifth wheel toy hauler that you've been eyeballing. But inherently, that can also raise problems. If you get a travel trailer that's kind of small and it doesn't put a tremendous amount of tongue weight on the back, which means it's relatively light as well, you could actually be transferring a significant amount of shock to the actual A-frame of that RV. I've made a lot of videos talking about this, and that's where you might want to consider a shock absorbing hitch, like a shocker hitch, or something that's going to take and dampen some of that harshness from the back of the truck, which again isn't really going to give you much of a bouncing effect until you really, really load this thing up with weight. So when I talk about lighter RVs, I mean RVs that only have maybe 800 pounds or less of weight that you're going to be transferring to the back of the truck, because that's not going to do much to compress the suspension here. Really, even upwards of 11 or 1200 pounds might not do a heck of a lot to compress the suspension here, which means a lot of shock could be transferred to the front of your RV, and you could potentially cause a failure of that front A-frame section purely because of the amount of leverage and energy that's having to be absorbed by that A-frame whenever you hit bumps and you go over things that on traditional pickup trucks would have a little bit of play there, a little bit of dampening effect to prevent that shock from actually impacting the frame so much. Fuel economy. Anytime you get a dually like this, a big negative is always going to be fuel economy. Whether you're towing or not, you're probably not going to see anywhere in the high teens. It's going to be in the low teens. It's going to be probably in the mid to low teens at best. Probably 15, 16 miles per gallon on the highway when you're not towing anything, all the way down to like 8 or 9 if you're towing something really, really heavy. Most of the time, you're probably going to hover between that 11.5 and 14.5 between city and highway driving whenever you're towing or not towing, depending on how heavy your trailer is. But these are things you should always be aware of if fuel economy and price of fuel is important to you. And you know, one that I do need to add is insurance. Having a truck like this, depending on your state, depending on your driving record, depending on rates, you may pay a little bit more for the insurance on something this heavy. Registration fees, things like that. The heavier the vehicle, the larger the vehicle, sometimes means more expensive insurance, as well as higher registration fees whenever it comes time to renew that. So always keep that in mind as well. But for me, probably the biggest negatives that I've had of owning a dually is whenever you're not towing anything, you don't have a lot of weight in the back, the fact that it is not going to be a smooth ride. The amount you pay in fuel is going to be more because you're definitely going to be burning through more fuel. And the width, just the fact that you are going to be wider. So there are areas like ATMs and bank tellers and things that are more difficult to get through because of that extra width, or at least you have to pay a lot more attention to what's going on. The length can also play into that as well. Having an incredibly long truck like this can also make it a little bit more difficult to fit in certain areas, to not take up 2 parking spots or not stick out too far off of a parking spot when you're at Sam's Club or at Lowe's or Home Depot. These are all things to think about. For me, the pros outweigh the cons. I love the capability, I love the looks, I love the payload capacity, I love the space, I love the power, and I love just the sheer heft you get in these trucks. And quite frankly, you can absolutely say they command the road, because they do. They are really, really beautiful vehicles, and they do so much for the people who love them, like myself. Anyways, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think. If you have any more pros, any more negatives you want to add. I know price is probably going to be one because they're not getting any cheaper, but yeah, drop a comment below. I'd love to know your thoughts. Anyways, guys, if you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up, and we'll talk to you again very soon.